समिट के लिए 140 करोड़ भारतीय उत्सुकता पूर्वक आपका इंतजार कर रहे हैं.
Сделано в Индии, ощутимый. Вот не грех повторять то, что
in the workforce. Now, more and more women are giving financial independence a lot of priority, sometimes even more than marriage. They want to be financially independent. Women have now very much a very strong part of the workforce. The offices are also been made to be gender sensitive.
Women have always worked.
Yes.
Just that post.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsx. I'm Megha Sharma, and a very important historic day today. It's President Putin of Russia who has finally arrived in India. There were preparations that were going on for days and weeks together, and that's the exclusive picture that you're seeing from inside the car, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Putin are seen talking, sharing a thought. And in fact, this is right after Prime Minister Narendra Modi welcomed President Putin from his official aircraft, and both the leaders sat in the same vehicle and travelled all the way to the Prime Minister's official residence, 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. So that's a glimpse of what transpired between both leaders during that a few minutes journey from the Palam Air Force station right up to the 7 Lok Kalyan Marg, where that private dinner is in progress. We saw those visuals of the Prime Minister escorting President Putin inside the corridors of 7 Lok Kalyan Marg, and that picture says 1,000 words. Both leaders are happy. It seems like President Putin is sharing some piece of information, an anecdote, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi beaming. Of course, you know, both these leaders share a camaraderie that goes years ago, because that was the first time when Prime Minister Narendra Modi was in an official delegation under then Prime Minister of India, Vajpayee. And that was his perhaps his first encounter with President Putin. President Putin at that point of time was the Prime Minister of Russia, and since then there have been several visits and meetings that both leaders have had with Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the capacity of the head of state, head of government of India, and President Putin, who has been the Russian president, the Russian head of state since 2008. So those are those. We're going to get you more of these visuals that will be trickling in as we continue with our conversations with my reporters who are firmly lodged on the ground. We have with us two of my reporters, one right outside 7 Lok Kalyan Marg, the other one is at the ITC Maurya, where President Putin would be staying during the course of his 27-hour visit. Just a little more than a day that one day that he's going to be spending in India, in New Delhi. Like I said, there is a private dinner that is taking place right now. There were official visuals, those video that had been shared, and that saw the Prime Minister escorting President Putin inside the corridors of the 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. All right, let me get in my panelists into the conversation. I have with me Professor Rohan Gunaratna. Professor Gunaratna, how important is it when the Prime Minister breaks protocol and goes to the airport at the Palam Air Force station and receives President Putin? That goes on to reflect the kind of bonhomie, the friendship that these two leaders have with each other, that of course, you know, talking at the state level, at the government to government level, but also perhaps transcending those boundaries.
Russia and India has enjoyed a very old friendship. It's a Cold War friendship. The Indian friendship with the United States started only after 1990. So what we are seeing is that Prime Minister Modi expressed that by receiving President Putin personally. Of course, this visit marks a very significant development. It demonstrates that there is true multipolarity because India today works with the United States, works with Russia, and in the future, India may also even work with China. So what we are seeing is to advance Indian interests, India will work with multiple actors. And of course, despite the pressure by the United States, especially by President Trump, by doubling the tariffs, still Modi is determined to demonstrate India's friendship with Russia, despite sanctions on Russian oil.
Right.
India will work with Russia to move forward on a number of trade and defense agreements.
Absolutely, absolutely. There are going to be a slew of those documents that are going to be signed in the presence of both the leaders. We need to know there are at least 20 plus of these documents that relate to trade, that relate to investments, opening up markets, Russian markets. We are talking about a number of Indian products and services traveling up to Russia, reduction of those tariffs. Those all are matters that will be brought in the agenda when those documents are signed by a number of these leaders, ministers and deputy ministers that President Putin has brought alongside him. 7 of them that are accompanying him, including the defense minister of Russia as well. Ambassador Yogesh Gupta, former diplomat, is also on the show with me. Ambassador Gupta, let's hear it from you with regards to, the focus area and the briefings that had been held on the eve of the big visit of President Putin by both the Ministry of External Affairs as well as by the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, single-handedly pointed on the economic and trade relations. How the target of $70 billion trade between India and Russia has achieved 63%, $63 billion of trade happens when India imports goods and services from Russia. There's only a $7 billion trade that happens that is in favor of India, and that is the imbalance, that is the aim of the two leaders, to bring about some sort of a semblance, some sort of an equitability. How is that going to happen in the meetings that are planned in the coming hours?
Megha, President Putin made a very important statement before he left Moscow, where he said that Russia is looking forward to go as far in the bilateral relationship as India is willing to go. And Russia is willing to have a no-limits partnership with India. Now, this is very significant because it means that from the Russian side, they have no more any hesitations or any ambiguities about expanding or deepening this relationship. And the fact that President Putin is coming with 7 of his cabinet ministers and such a big delegation, and Prime Minister Modi has personally gone to welcome President Putin. India has had a lot of disappointments in its relationship with the US in the last 2 years. And after these disappointments, I think India has come to the conclusion that there is only that far that we can go in our relationship with the US, because the US refuses to understand India's concerns. US thinks that India is a developing country and India should just abide by or listen to what they are saying, and India's concerns are not important, and India should just follow what they want to, what they are saying. Now, that is something not acceptable to India. So I think we have also come to the conclusion that in the present international world order as things are, we need to strengthen our relationship with Russia. We are going to be less mindful or less sensitive of what the Americans or what Trump administration thinks about our Russia relationship than we had been in the last 2 years. So given this background, I think the stage is set for India and Russia to expand its bilateral trade. India is willing to export many more items. India would be willing to set up manufacturing bases in the US for consumer goods, for electronics, and for other things that Russia needs. Russia doesn't want to depend totally on China, because it's not a good idea to depend on one country for all the things.
Okay, all right. Stay on with me. I'm being joined by Gilbert Doctorow. He's a Russian affairs expert. Gilbert, let's hear it from you with regards to everything that is on the table when we talk about manufacturing, nuclear energy, those small modular reactors where a deal is likely to be signed, those documents are to be signed. Talk about aircraft manufacturing, high-tech technology transfer. We've spoken about RELOS, the ratification of that bill happened in Duma only yesterday. So that sets the trend for 2026 and in fact the years to come by for India-Russia renewed cooperation in a number of fields and not just in defense.
Yes, I think that there's a lot of room for creative thinking here to find solutions because the problems facing this trade are not small. India's, to my understanding, India's bilateral trade with the United States is dominated by its sales in the IT sector, which I think account for 70% or more of the total turnover of in excess of $100 billion in Indian-US trade. That means that the single largest component of all the trade is not really affected by Mr. Trump's sanctions, to my understanding, whereas sales of textiles and shoes and things like that are, of course, hit hard by Mr. Trump's sanctions. The same question comes up in Russian-Indian trade. But India is not a big global consumer exporter. India is not a country that easily can establish large-scale bilateral trade with any partner simply because of that. And the Russians will surely sign deals for sale of perhaps of their latest generation fighter jets, and certainly we know about this deal for the leasing of a nuclear submarine. There will probably be some discussion about air defenses and S-400s. But Russia is selling. The question is, what is Russia going to buy? We all know there's a very big accumulation of rupee assets held by Russia in India, and there's no easy way to turn those to commoditize that and turn it into something useful for Russia. There are only so many mangoes that Russia can buy from India to satisfy its supermarkets. So it is a very big challenge, and I think this whole question of co-production is probably one of the avenues to a solution of this big imbalance in trade.
Yes. Yes. General G. Dwivedi is also on the show with me. General Dwivedi, I do want to specifically mention about this. There is a 2-day business summit that has been organized, one that has already happened right before President Putin flew into India. And this was addressed by the Indian Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, and there was his counterpart, his Russian counterpart, who was also present. There were 7 other ministers from agriculture, from technology, from manufacturing, who were all present. And then there was this massive business delegation that had also flown in alongside these ministers from Russia. And to mirror that, there were a number of Indian investors, manufacturers, businesses who were present at this summit that is called the India-Russia Forum. This was in collaboration with the Russia Business Center and FICCI. This is going to carry on tomorrow as well, which gives us an idea of the importance that both countries put on trade and investment, and particularly wanting to balance the trade deficit that India right now holds with Russia. Do you think there are avenues where India can gain its strength by way of course, there was number one about skill mobility, sending in more of our skilled and unskilled and semi-skilled workers to Russia, but also talking about opening up market for marine foods and products, talking about pomegranates, talking about potatoes. These were some of the things that were mentioned during these press conferences, in which the media was also briefed, which the public was also briefed about. So, which are these key areas that we can potentially be able to build our association with Russia in a bid to reducing this trade deficit that we have?
Well, Megha, definitely trade deficit is one of the major issues, because there is so much imbalance, especially after we started buying oil in very large volumes. In fact, about 30-35% of our requirement is now coming from Russia, and this has escalated the trade deficit, because trade today stands about $65 billion, and we are only exporting pittance, about $5 to $6 billion. So definitely this is one of the major issues. But we need to understand the larger picture as to what are the pillars or fundamentals on which the India-Russia relations stand. One pillar, most important, was the defense, because we have been buying the Russian defense equipment, and I, for 38 years in the army, has fought largely with the Russian equipment. So that is one area where defense-related industry can play a huge role, because India has made defense corridors, two of them, one in Uttar Pradesh, one in Chennai, and that's where one of the areas where a lot of collaboration in the defense-related industry can come in. The second point is beyond defense, what are the areas? Yes, because Russia is hugely dependent upon the agriculture products, and that's one area where India can find new markets, because these markets are unexploited, and we need to now reorientate our both supply chains and also our markets, where Russia can have a huge, we have a huge opportunity. Now, some of the specific areas which we can address with Russia beyond food and agriculture is a lot of our electronics, our technology, which can actually be also not only related to defense, but it can go beyond the defense, because the point today is India definitely has, technology edge. We have a lot of human resource, and therefore a lot can be done in a collaborative manner, which will be exploited. And one more issue which is that energy, because after all, if we are importing oil from in Russia, we are refining the oil, selling back that oil back to the Western markets. After all, it's not just only the oil flowing in, the oil is flowing out. So a lot of energy related issues also will be tackled. But on the whole, I think we need to evolve a new blueprint, because this is, as Gilbert said, a lot of creativity is involved, because we got to now play out new playbooks, because the old playbooks are not going to hold good. So this is the time that when two sides will go in deeper and see which are the areas which we need to exploit beyond the defense.
Okay.
Right.
Purnima Nath is also on the show with me. Purnima, talking about, I do have to emphasize on RELOS, talking about reciprocal exchange of logistic support. This is very, very essential. Interoperability, talking about, our air bases and our airfields can be used by Russian military and vice versa. What is the message that gets sent out to the world?
Thank you so much for having me, Megha. Really appreciate that, and your show actually fascinates me. I got to learn so much from your speakers as well. So especially speaking about Russia-India relationship, the message to the world is that it's obviously today we are in a multipolar world, and I particularly feel, being a Republican conservative in Republican Party, I feel that America is unwilling and unable to see see the geopolitical shift and the chessboard that is changing. And then if you look at the recent redressing of Monroe Doctrine, it's sort of like a new Monroe Doctrine, attacking and establishing dominance over South America, you kind of understand that Western imperial ambition has not gone anywhere. It is resurging with European messaging as well as the American. So whatever the Americans say somehow shows up in the European shores as well. And that's what we have seen during our campaign in the 2024. Unfortunately, but this, I don't know if this is going to pan out very well. And America has to understand that the world existed before America came to an existence. Unfortunately, many of us like me, we didn't understand the America first. It was never a slogan for America actually, and MAGA. Unfortunately, it was a blueprint for world dominance, and that is exactly what has showed up in trade policies, tariff threatening, sanctions threatening global leaders, insulting global leaders, punishing economic sanctions, weaponizing, so militarization. So I think this is Indian and American, Indian and Russian new chapter, I would say. But I also say that heads of the two power, one is a dead economy, one is a paper tiger, are meeting today, and I'm sure America is watching. I'm sure Europe is watching.
Okay, all right. Coming back to my guests, Ambassador Yogesh, again, focus cannot be, swayed from the Relos deal, the pact, the defense military pact that has been ratified only yesterday in the lower house of the parliament in Russia. And what are the advantages both countries have, and also the bigger message that be sent out to adversaries and allies together?
Megha, what has happened is that in the last 2 years, we have seen the United States taking a more dubious kind of a role in the areas near India. I'm talking of the Indian subcontinent, I'm talking of our neighborhood, I'm talking of Indian Ocean. The kind of regime change it has undertaken in Sri Lanka, in Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and tried in India. We are not happy with the American intervention in these countries. So if the Americans are going to assume that kind of a adversarial posture, then we would certainly be happy to, have the ships of Russia also in the Indian Ocean. Why not? And India has provided logistical access to many countries. That includes the US, that includes the countries of Quad and others. And Russia is our old friend. It's trusted friend. It's reliable, trustworthy friend. So why not Russia? And so that is the spirit behind. And if we can help Russia to expand its presence, by giving this sort of access, and we can get access on the Russian ports in the Far East, in the Black Sea and other places. So that will help us also in our expanding global posture. And so that is basically the strategy behind it. And that is how it is working out.
Okay. Professor Gunaratnam, again a specific issue that I want to raise. This is about the Arctic shipbuilding. There have been a number of countries that India has been working in close proximity with, including Norway, which works with India in close collaboration in shipbuilding. Transfer of technology that has happened, and the idea is to bring Norwegian technology, allow for shipbuilding to happen at a fast pace using India's resources and exporting it to the world. We also see a similar deal that is on the eve of being signed during President Putin's visit as well. How important, again, a huge chunk of the exchequer is also being allocated for building India's maritime capabilities. Again, these are two aspects that come very naturally together for India and Russia to collaborate. What does the future hold?
Russia is also a superpower. It is not economically as powerful as China or the United States, but in terms of its military capabilities, it has a very huge infrastructure, its cyber capabilities, nuclear, missile, and other capabilities. Certainly, it's very advanced in its naval capabilities and space capabilities. So, India will benefit a lot from cooperation, collaboration, and partnership with Russia. Of course, the Indian military was very dependent on the Russian equipment and technology. Although more recently, India has manufactured domestically a considerable amount of that. But still, India relies a lot on Russia for capabilities, whether it's land forces, air forces, or naval forces. So I personally believe that this visit is where the two countries will discuss wide-ranging issues, primarily trade, investment, and defense. But the defense cooperation will be the one that will be the most prominent and the most dominant.
Right. Okay, fair enough. Gilbert, understanding from you in terms of defense, of course, there are never any defense pacts or agreements that are signed when the heads of governments are meeting, holding those bilateral talks. But we see that the defense minister of Russia is over here. He came right before President Putin, and there was this a meeting that was held with the India counterpart Rajnath Singh, and there have been a lot of talks talking about the Sukhoi 57s, talking about procuring S-500s, and of course that very important 10,000 crore rupee S-400 missile deal that if sources are to be believed, has already been given a go ahead. In this race and in this, I would say, a quantity per se of India wanting to have its defense association with Russia intact and grow even further vis-a-vis its diplomacy and alignment with the United States of America. You think it's a tight rope that India has to walk?
Well, not really. Look, Russia has equipment that is not only theoretically advanced, but is proven on the battlefield. Ukraine is one big shooting match now. It's a shooting range. And everything that Russia is experimenting with there, if successful, is going into serial production. So India, in moving close to Russia, is going to take advantage of the world's best equipment, battle-proven equipment. At the same time, there is a negative which has to be called out. Russia is using all of its military production for its needs in the ongoing war. Therefore, any orders that are concluded are not going to be delivered immediately. Maybe Belarus gets Oreshniks at the end, before the end of this year. But other countries, India included, will have to stand in line a little bit until the war winds down and Russia can afford to export its most advanced equipment.
Okay, stay on with me. I'm getting this update. The press secretary of the Russian President Putin, Mr. Dmitry Peskov, has now stated that India and Russia share a relationship in the most sensitive areas. He's gone ahead and said that President Putin's visit will ensure a privileged strategic partnership between the two nations. Peskov has also said that India is indeed Russia's great partner. So a lot of that positive sentiment, positive narrative that is being built, and I mean, both countries are natural allies, as has been reflected, demonstrated multiple times, innumerable times in the previous decades as well. Coming back to you, General Dwivedi, again the question on defense. The fact that Russia remains an all-weather ally for India, and particularly with the massive success with which India was able to fight Pakistan with its military strikes, Operation Sindoor, and the S-400 defense systems imported from Russia were of extreme significance. How important does it become to forge our trade, our defense trade ties, even transfer of technologies, joint production of fighter jets here on?
Well, Megha, the point is that our defense ties with Russia actually developed due to certain geopolitical constraints. During the Cold War, we are not getting the kind of weapons we needed from the West or from America. So it was Russia only which was the market and which as a strategic partner met most of our requirement. As I said earlier, that in my about 4 decades of the service in the army, 5 times we have fought with largely the Russian weapon systems, and they have proved very effective in all the wars, made by the ground forces, tanks or BMPs or the missiles or the aircraft, Su-30, MiG-29, MiG-27 and helicopters, and of course not to forget the Navy. We have been operating the Kilo class submarines, also the Vikramaditya, the erstwhile Gorshakov. The point is that Russia willy-nilly became our major source of weapon system because of geopolitical constraints, and Russia more than has met our requirement. Now, how do we move on from here? Because India has changed its policy. First and foremost, weapons are bought not like you go and buy a car or you go and buy a fridge. No, you buy the weapons based on your threat perception, based on your doctrines, based on your strategy. And therefore, most of our inventory is actually of Russian origin. If you take the fighter aircraft, we haven't bought single American fighter jet. While we have bought Globemaster C-17, we have bought C-130, but we haven't bought any fighter jets. Our inventory of fighter jets largely either French Rafales or Mirage 2000 or the Russians. So therefore, when we are looking at the Su-57E, because that's an immediate requirement, because we don't have 5th generation fighter, whereas China has 300 of them, J-20s, and they also have 6th generation H-20 up in the air. So therefore, America is not willing to transfer the technology F-35, so we are left with no option but to go for Su-57. I'll just finish 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And S-400 was a very tried out weapon in Op Sindoor, so we had negotiated. We have bought 3 regiments, we wanted 2 more and still 2 more, and we are looking at S-500, which is a upgraded version S-400 because it has a range of 500. It can engage targets at much longer ranges. So what we are looking at today is the equipment which is aligned with our firstly strategy and doctrines, and secondly it is akin with an inventory, and third part, if we want to co-produce Su-57, then our assembly and production line of Su-30 would actually easily convert and manufacture the aircraft jointly. Megha.
Purnima, coming to you, and of course when we talk about India-Russia relations, we have to speak about energy. And there have been humongous tariffs that have been imposed by United States of America for Indian companies buying Russian oil, which has resulted in reduction of those purchases. There have been a bunch of Russian energy companies, Russian oil companies, including Rosneft, who have their CEOs have arrived. So there are going to be deliberations, conversations that are going to happen. And Russia is, put it completely on the table and said that, we are happy to provide oil to India at even more discounted rates. How do you think India can allow for market forces to not govern its decision to buy oil where it finds it's cheapest, especially in wake of the tariffs that make it even more difficult for Indian oil importers to trade with Russia in oil?
Megha, I would like to say that what imperial powers, the European imperial powers, whether Dutch, French, British, and etc., have done for centuries, Trump is trying to do it in one term for 4 years. Whether it's terrorizing dissenting countries or economic shaming, public shaming actually, He's not looking for diplomacy. He's actually looking for dominance. He's not looking for alliance. He's actually looking for subjects. He's not looking for respect. They're looking for obedience. And I don't think India, coming from Indian background and civilizational ethos, India is not that country where you can terrorize and bully and threat, whether it's coming from trade perspective or not. India always aligned with the non-alliance policy that India had. Unfortunately, America didn't like it, and neither European powers. But in this global power shift, this is going to be a tricky situation for India to ally with both. I mean, recently India did purchase 10% of LPG from America, and that was 1-year contract. And Reliance is not buying the crude oil right now. So I'm sure in this particular conversation that is happening between Modi and Putin, this is going to be one of the critical conversation as to how do you go around the sanctions and the bullying and frozen assets and etc. Even Indian companies' assets were frozen. So how do you go around and do business? I mean, I think the global message at this point of time between these two leaders is very simple. You want to corner the global leaders, they're going to find a different avenue and alternate routes. I mean, similarly, in the campaign, President Trump, just a 30-second, Trump kept saying BRIC is dead. I'm going to make sure BRIC is dead. Is really BRIC dead? I mean, if you keep threatening like that, they're going to the alliances are going to come from different parts of the world. And as your other speakers actually spoke about, that India has been actually surrounded by all these regime changes operations, and this is no longer a covert operation. This is literally CIA style overt operations that's happening by United States, and this needs to be called out. And if India actually needs to do well, they have to also exert the sphere of influence, not.
Okay, all right. So Ambassador Gupta, talking about the sensitivity of the relationship between India and United States of America, and where does Russia play a role over here, keeping in mind that we have been trudging at a very slow pace in signing that comprehensive trade agreement with United States of America. There have been a lot of hindrances, there have been a lot of hiccups, obstacles that we have seen over the course of the months that have passed by. Obviously, there is a very direct, straightforward narrative that America has built, that if India does not end buying oil from Russia, there are going to be tariffs that are going to be imposed. That leaves our trade deal with America in jeopardy. How do we? What is the messaging that is being given over here? Of course, Russia at the end of the day is openly wanting to deal with India at all levels as well. But India perhaps needs to sit back and think about how it is going to move forward with both these allies, with both these partners, and then strategize its next move.
Garima, sorry, Meghna, the issue is that we are not happy with the policies of the United States of America, because they are linking non-trade issues with trade. They are saying you can't buy oil from Russia. Next, they will say you can't buy arms from Russia. Next, they will say you can't do this in Pakistan. You have to do this with Bangladesh. Now, trade, and there are only certain things to which we can agree, and there are certain things to which we can't agree. And we have been very keen to work out a trade agreement with America, but we have our own sensitivities, we have our own issues. We have a very sensitive agricultural sector, which consists of a lot of small and marginal farmers. We have to take into account their concerns. Similarly, we have a very sensitive dairy sector, where again, we have to tread very cautiously. in certain areas like technologies, manufacturing. We are not at a advanced stage like America or China, so we have to take care of our industries. So what I'm trying to say is that we are trying to accommodate America in certain areas, but in certain other areas we can't accommodate America. So we are trying to explore if it is possible to work out a trade agreement with America, respecting our core interest. As previous speaker Punjabaji just said, India is not a hippity-tippity developing country, which can be treated by America in any way that it likes. If we are able to get a respectable agreement which takes care of our interests, we'll sign it. If we can't get that sort of an agreement, then we have to pay the price of not trading so much with the United States. Then we will have to look for other markets. We will have to work for an order in which the United States doesn't play such a dominating role. Because today the United States controls the global commerce, it is trying to control the global finances, it is trying to control the global transport, communications, and so on. We have to move towards a world which is a more multipolar world, in which more countries other than the United States also have a share in controlling these things. So this is an experiment in
but again an experiment that will have a long gestation time, and we are heavily reliant on America. America stands at a trade deficit with India. Our traders, our manufacturers, exporters are completely reliant when it comes to providing pharmaceuticals, textiles, agricultural products, which becomes very pinching when these tariffs are imposed, and this has been very reflective in the way the markets have performed. Today, rupee touches as at the lowest at 90, which is something of a worry in wake of this the cascading effect of tariffs that India and its manufacturers, the business community, is witnessing. Let me get in Professor Gunaratna back into the conversation, and I want to talk about the issue of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And while of course it was in the news in the last 48 hours, there have been ambassadors of the three important European countries that have spoken out against President Putin right before he arrived in India. And of course, there was a retort that was made by the ambassador of Russia to India in that op-ed that he went on to write. There has not been any comment that has come from United States of America thus far. In fact, the global narrative at this time seems to be that Russia is blaming Europe in building obstacles between US and Russia to come up with a peace deal. How is this going to play out in this meeting between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi?
Just before President Putin flew into India, he had a meeting with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, envoys of President Trump, and they couldn't have an agreement on how to end the Ukraine war. The larger problem between Russia and Europe is that there is a heavy build-up, a NATO presence on the Russian border, on the European side. So it's a larger dispute that has to be resolved. This fight will continue between Russia and Ukraine and may even extend to the rest of Europe. President Trump genuinely wanted to resolve it. He met with President Putin in Alaska, and subsequently he had many conversations with him to end it. But it's a very intractable conflict. So I presume that Trump will try his best to end this conflict, because it's not going to help either Russia or Europe or any of the other countries that are involved in it. So I think that this conflict will be one of the issues that will be discussed between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin.
Okay. Okay. General Gigi Dwivedi, again the idea, you think a peaceful Eastern Europe and a deal signed between Ukraine and Russia is going to be beneficial for India? And perhaps if this deal was signed by way of negotiations between US and Russia that were related to trade and investment, exploration of exploration of the Arctic, as had been discussed, I think that was on the anvil, especially after the Alaska summit that concluded, but did not really have any strong points to carry forward for both the leaders. But do you think business between US and Russia would be a sign for a peace negotiation, a peace deal to happen, and thereby reflective of how India can move forward in its trade associations with Russia?
Well, Megha, as a student of strategy, I like to make 3-4 very pertinent points. Firstly, wars are fought for certain political objectives and military objectives, and they come to conclusion if both sides either have achieved the objectives or one side have been defeated squarely. Now, this is one case where Russia has not achieved its objectives, even I think 1/3 of them, and Ukraine is not on the knees. Ukraine is fighting on. So there is a kind of some kind of stalemate that is on, and the peace can only prevail when both sides have something to take and they have to give. While the conditions laid down by President Trump are not acceptable because they cross all the red lines. After all, why did the Ukraine fight for last more than almost around 4 years and lost 100,000 of their troops if they have to give back the complete Donbas area? That is not acceptable. Now, how can he impose that within 100 days there will be elections? How can he impose that Ukraine has no choice to join NATO? So the point is, I don't think peace is anywhere near the horizon, because the kind of agreement that is being forwarded is not acceptable. Second, yes, it is not only going to benefit India, it will benefit the whole world if this war can come to some kind of a conclusion. But that's not exactly going to happen, because India has taken a hit. Firstly, our diplomacy was very on a tight leash because we had to really balance it out, and in the bargain we went on to irritate Americans and Europeans because of two reasons. Firstly, we didn't come out very clearly to condemn Russia. Secondly, we kept on buying the oil. So we have taken a bit of hit, but it's in our interest if the war comes to an end. But I don't think the war will end, because the kind of negotiation on the table, the two sides do not have any convergence point. And I think Trump, proposal is not meeting the aspiration of the Ukrainian or the European. And my last point is, the wars will end only when one side actually decides to end it and the other side accepts it. In this case, President Putin is not interested in ending the war, and Ukraine will fight on, because they are not going to barter their territory, their sovereignty and their pride.
Okay, that's one way of looking at things. Of course, the Russian perspective is starkly different. I'll take a quick break, come right back. On the other side, more updates. Of course, that private dinner continues, and after the conclusion of that dinner, President Putin will be heading to his hotel, where he'll be staying the night. And tomorrow, of course, there are those plethora of engagements that he would be participating in. Stay tuned.
Thank you.